wasting your time with this photography nonsense." My father's voice cut through the Sunday dinner table like a knife. He didn't even look up from his plate as he spoke, dismissing my dreams with the same casual cruelty he'd perfected over 30 years. I sat there, frozen, holding the acceptance letter from the Art Institute's summer program. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. Instead, I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in my purse. "I understand," I said quietly. What he didn't know was that I'd already made my decision. While he'd spent the last 6 months mocking my hobby, calling it childish and unprofitable, I'd been building something he couldn't see. Something that would change everything. My younger sister caught my eye from across the table, concern flickering across her face. She knew that tone in my voice, the calm before something significant. My father continued eating, completely unaware that this dinner marked the beginning of his biggest regret. "My name is Brenna Ashford, and I'm 42 years old. For most of my life, I'd been the dutiful daughter who never quite measured up in my father's eyes. While my brother inherited the family's investment firm and my sister became a corporate lawyer, I'd taken a different path. I married young, raised 2 wonderful kids, and worked as an administrative assistant at a dental office. But photography had always been my passion. What started as a hobby, capturing my children's milestones, local landscapes, neighborhood events, had slowly evolved into something more. Over the past 3 years, I'd been quietly building a portfolio, taking weekend workshops, and selling prints at local markets. My husband knew about my dreams and supported them completely. My father, however, saw it as a phase, something to humor until I came to my senses. That Sunday dinner happened 2 months ago. The day everything changed wasn't actually that day. It was 3 months earlier. 3 months before that dinner, I discovered something that shifted my entire perspective. I was organizing my father's home office while he recovered from minor surgery. My mother had asked me to help sort through some old files. That's when I found the folder. Inside were rejection letters, dozens of them. Letters addressed to my father from publishing houses, literary agents, and magazines. All dated from 30 years ago, before he'd taken over his father's investment firm. My father had wanted to be a writer. He'd written an entire novel, submitted it everywhere, and been rejected repeatedly. Then he'd given up, buried his dream, and built a successful but joyless career in finance. Suddenly, his constant criticism of my photography made sense. He wasn't protecting me from failure. He was projecting his own regrets onto me. I carefully photographed every rejection letter with my phone and returned the folder exactly as I'd found it. That discovery changed everything. I started planning immediately. If my father had taught me anything through his investment firm lectures at family dinners, it was the importance of strategy and documentation. I opened a separate business account at a different bank, one he'd never think to ask about. I registered my photography business officially, obtaining all necessary licenses and permits. Every weekend sale, every small commission, every dollar earned went into that account. I also began documenting everything. I kept detailed records of my projects, client testimonials, and sales figures. I photographed my work meticulously, creating a comprehensive portfolio that showcased my growth as an artist. Most importantly, I applied to every grant, competition, and opportunity I could find. The Art Institute's summer program was just one of 15 applications I'd submitted. My husband would watch me working late into the night, editing photos and writing applications. "He's going to be shocked," he'd say with a supportive smile. I'd simply nod, focused on building something undeniable. The rejections came first, of course. Just like my father's writing submissions 30 years ago, most of my applications were declined. But unlike my father, I didn't let them stop me. Each rejection taught me something. My portfolio strengthened. My artist statements became clearer. My technical skills improved. Then, slowly, the acceptances started arriving. A small grant from the local arts council. An honorable mention in a regional photography contest. An invitation to display my work at a community gallery. I documented everything, but I told my father nothing. At family dinners, he'd ask about my little hobby with barely concealed condescension. I'd smile and change the subject. My mother would give me sympathetic looks, trying to smooth over his harsh comments. My sister would defend me, which only made him more dismissive. "She's 42 years old," he'd say. "When is she going to focus on something realistic?" I'd simply eat my dinner, thinking about the exhibition opening the following month. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at the dental office, scheduling appointments, when my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line made my heart stop. "Congratulations from the National Photography Excellence Foundation." I'd applied for their Emerging Artist grant 3 months earlier and forgotten about it entirely. The email explained that I'd been selected as one of 12 recipients nationwide. The grant included $25,000, a feature in their quarterly magazine, and an opportunity to display my work at their annual exhibition in Chicago. My hands trembled as I read it twice, then 3 times. The grant alone would cover the cost of professional equipment, website development, and marketing materials I'd been saving for. The exhibition would put my work in front of gallery owners, collectors, and art critics from across the country. I forwarded the email to my husband immediately. His response was simple. "I'm so proud of you. When do we tell your father?" I didn't tell my father immediately. Instead, I spent the next 3 weeks preparing. I hired a professional website designer who created a stunning online portfolio. I invested in new camera equipment and lighting. I booked a small studio space downtown for client meetings and shoots. I officially left my job at the dental office, giving them a month's notice and leaving on excellent terms. Most importantly, I prepared for the National Photography Excellence Foundation exhibition. They featured my work prominently, a series I'd created called Forgotten Dreams that explored abandoned spaces where people had once pursued their passions. The irony wasn't lost on me. The Sunday dinner where my father dismissed the Art Institute letter happened during this preparation period. He had no idea what was coming. Neither did the rest of my family, except my husband. I wanted the results to speak for themselves. 3 days after that dinner, the Foundation's magazine arrived at newsstands nationwide. My phone started ringing early Thursday morning. First, it was my sister. "Brenna, you're in Photography Today magazine. There's a 4-page spread about your work." Then friends started texting. Former classmates sent messages on social media. The dental office called to congratulate me. My kids called from college, thrilled and proud, but I waited for one specific call. It came at 11:30, my mother. "Honey, your father just saw the magazine at his office. Someone brought it in. He's asking questions." Her voice was careful, measured. "He wants to know why you didn't tell him." I smiled, stirring my coffee. "I'll come by this afternoon. I have something to show him." When I arrived at my parents' house 3 hours later, my father was in his study. The magazine sat open on his desk, my photograph staring up at him. He looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. "You didn't think this was worth mentioning?" I placed a folder on his desk. I wanted to wait until I had something substantial to share. The folder contained everything. Copies of the grant award letter, exhibition invitations from 3 galleries, a contract offer from a commercial photography agency, letters of recommendation from established photographers who'd seen my work, sales records showing I'd earned $40,000 from photography in the past 18 months. But most importantly, at the very bottom, I'd included printouts of his rejection letters from 30 years ago, the ones I'd found in his filing cabinet. My father's face went pale as he shuffled through the documents. When he reached the rejection letters, his hands stopped moving. "Where did you find these?" he asked quietly. 3 months ago when Mom asked me to organize your office." I sat down across from him. "I realized something when I saw them. You weren't trying to protect me from failure. You were projecting your own disappointment onto me." He didn't respond immediately. He just stared at those old letters, probably reliving the pain of giving up. Finally, he looked up. "I never wanted you to feel that rejection." "Rejection is part of growth," I replied. "You taught me about risk and reward in business. Photography isn't different. Yes, I was rejected dozens of times, but I kept going because this matters to me." I pulled out my phone and showed him my portfolio website. "I didn't tell you about my progress because I needed to prove something to myself first. Not to you, to myself." My father scrolled through the images slowly. His expression shifted from surprise to something that might have been pride. Or regret, maybe both. "These are remarkable," he admitted finally. "When did you get this good?" "Gradually, over years of practice, study, and dedication, the same way you built your investment firm." He closed the magazine carefully. "The article says you're exhibiting in Chicago next month." "Yes, 3 galleries have expressed interest in representing my work. I'm meeting with them during the exhibition." For the first time in my memory, my father looked genuinely impressed. but I wasn't finished yet. I had more to show him. "There's something else," I said, pulling up another document on my phone. "I've been invited to teach a workshop at the Art Institute, the same program you called a waste of time 2 months ago." I watched his face carefully. "They want me to mentor emerging photographers, share my techniques, help others avoid giving up on their dreams." The words hung in the air between us. We both knew I was talking about more than photography. My father leaned back in his chair, looking older suddenly, tired. "I was wrong," he said quietly, "about dismissing your work, about calling it a hobby." "You were scared," I corrected him gently. "Scared I'd experience the same disappointment you did. But Dad, your rejections happened in a different era. You gave up after one novel. I've submitted hundreds of applications, entered countless competitions, faced rejection after rejection. The difference is I kept going." He picked up one of the rejection letters, his from decades ago. "I was 25 when I wrote this novel. I thought one book would make me famous immediately." "That's the difference between us," I continued. "I never expected immediate success. I built my skills slowly, learned from failures, and created opportunities through persistence." My father studied the magazine spread again. "Your mother always said you had talent. I thought she was being supportive, not objective." Mom was right. But talent alone isn't enough. I combined it with strategy, business planning, and relentless work. Things I learned from watching you build your firm, actually. Something shifted in his expression, pride maybe mixed with remorse. "I've spent 30 years telling myself I was being practical, protective. Really, I was just bitter." I reached across the desk and touched his hand. "It's not too late, to write again. You're only 65. He shook his head. "That ship has sailed, but you—" He gestured to the magazine. "You're just beginning, and I want to support that, really support it, not just tolerate it." "I'd like that," I said honestly. "But I need you to understand something. I'm doing this regardless of your approval." My father actually smiled at that. "I can see that. You've built an entire career while I was dismissing it as a hobby. That takes courage." "It takes desperation," I corrected. "Desperation to live authentically, to pursue something meaningful, to not wake up at 65 with a folder full of regrets." He flinched at that but didn't argue. Instead, he stood and walked to his bookshelf. He pulled out a manuscript box, dusty and worn. "My novel," he explained. "I've kept it all these years but never looked at it." He handed me the box. "Would you read it? Give me your honest opinion." I took the box carefully, surprised by the weight of it. Not just physical weight, but emotional. "Of course, but Dad, whether it's good or not doesn't matter as much as whether writing still brings you joy." "I don't know if it does anymore," he admitted. "But maybe it's time to find out." We talked for another hour. Really talked, maybe for the first time in years. The Chicago exhibition exceeded every expectation. The gallery space was beautiful, with high ceilings and perfect lighting. My Forgotten Dreams series was displayed prominently, each photograph telling a story of abandoned potential. An old dance studio with dusty mirrors. A closed bookstore with empty shelves. A shuttered music school with a lonely piano. Each image resonated with viewers who'd given up their own dreams. Gallery owners approached me throughout the evening. Collectors purchased 3 pieces immediately. Art critics took notes. By the end of the night, I'd signed representation agreements with 2 galleries and scheduled 4 commissioned projects. My husband stood beside me the entire evening, beaming with pride. My kids had driven up from college to attend. Even my sister came, bringing champagne. But the biggest surprise was seeing my father walk through the door. He'd driven 3 hours without telling anyone. I watched him move through the exhibition slowly, studying each photograph with genuine attention. When he reached the centerpiece, an image of an abandoned writer's studio with a typewriter covered in dust, he stood there for several minutes. When my father finally approached me, his eyes were wet. "That typewriter," he said, gesturing to the photograph. "Where did you find it?" "An estate sale last year. The family said their father had been a writer who'd given up after too many rejections. Sound familiar?" He nodded slowly. "You've captured something important here, not just abandoned spaces but abandoned selves, the people we could have been." "That's exactly right," I confirmed. A gallery owner named Autumn joined our conversation. "Must be Brenna's father, she has your eyes." "Apparently that's all she got from me," he joked, but there was sadness in it. "Actually," I interjected, "I got my understanding of business strategy from you, my persistence, my ability to plan long-term. Those traits came directly from watching you work." Autumn smiled. "Well, they've served her well. We're thrilled to represent her work." After Autumn moved on, my father turned to me. "I started reading my novel last week, after our conversation." And, I asked carefully. It's terrible, he laughed. Objectively awful, no wonder it was rejected. I smiled. But did you enjoy reading it, remembering who you were when you wrote it? He considered this. Yes, actually. That young man was hopeful, passionate, foolishly optimistic. I miss him. So write again, not to be published necessarily. Write because you miss that feeling. My father looked around the gallery, at the crowds admiring my work, at the success I'd built despite his doubts. You know what I regret most? All those years I could have been supporting you, encouraging you. Instead, I projected my failures onto you. You can start now, I said simply. Better late than never. He hugged me then, something he rarely did. I'm proud of you, not just for this success, but for not letting me stop you. You couldn't have stopped me even if you tried harder, I admitted. Once I found those rejection letters, I understood you were operating from fear, not wisdom. The rest of the evening was magical. 3 months after the Chicago exhibition, my photography business had transformed completely. I'd left the dental office permanently and now worked from my downtown studio. Corporate clients hired me for commercial shoots. Families booked portrait sessions months in advance. Magazines commissioned editorial work. I was invited to speak at photography conferences and teach workshops. My income had tripled what I'd earned in my administrative job, but more importantly, I was doing work I loved. Every morning, I woke up excited about the day ahead. That energy, that passion, had been missing from my life for years. My father and I met for coffee every Thursday morning now. Sometimes we talked about business strategy for my photography company. Sometimes we discussed his writing. He'd started working on a memoir about his years in finance, approaching it with no expectations beyond personal satisfaction. I'm writing for myself this time, he explained during one meeting. Not for publishers or critics, just to process my experiences. That's the healthiest approach, I encouraged him. Art should start from internal motivation, not external validation. During one Thursday morning coffee, my father brought a folder. I want to show you something, he said, sliding it across the table. Inside were financial documents, projections, investment summaries, account statements. I don't understand, I said, confused. What is this? I've been setting aside money, he explained. For a new initiative, I'm starting a foundation to support artists over 40 who are pursuing creative careers after years in other fields. I stared at him, speechless. The Ashford Foundation for Emerging Artists, he continued, will provide grants, mentorship, and resources. I want to help people like you, like who I could have been. Tears welled in my eyes. Dad, that's incredible. You inspired it. Watching you succeed despite my discouragement made me realize how many talented people give up because they lack support and resources. He pointed to the financial projections. I'm investing $500,000 initially. If we're strategic, we can help dozens of artists annually. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. This is your redemption arc. The Ashford Foundation launched 6 months later with a gala event. Artists from across the region attended, many of them over 40 and pursuing creative dreams after years in conventional careers. My father gave a speech that surprised everyone. I spent 30 years running from my own creative disappointment, he admitted to the crowd. I buried my writing dreams and convinced myself I was being practical. Then I watched my daughter succeed in photography despite my constant discouragement, and I realized I'd been wrong about everything. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. She showed me that age doesn't matter, that rejection is survivable, that passion combined with strategy can create remarkable outcomes. Tonight, we're launching this foundation to support others like her, people who refuse to let their dreams die quietly. The applause was thunderous. I stood in the back of the room, watching my father embrace his vulnerability publicly. This wasn't the dismissive, bitter man from Sunday dinners. This was someone transformed by witnessing authentic courage. After the speech, dozens of people approached me. Your father's story resonated with so many people, a painter told me. I'm 52 and just starting to pursue art seriously. His honesty about his own regrets gave me permission to try. This became a pattern throughout the evening. Artists thanked me for inspiring the foundation, but more importantly, they thanked my father for his vulnerability, for admitting he'd been wrong, for turning his regret into something constructive. My mother pulled me aside during the reception. You changed him, she said softly. After that Sunday dinner, after the magazine article, something shifted. He's become the man I married before bitterness hardened him. He changed himself, I corrected. I just refused to let his fears become mine. The foundation's first grant recipients were announced that evening. 12 artists over 40, each receiving financial support and mentorship. One was a 60-year-old former accountant pursuing sculpture. Another was a 45-year-old teacher writing her first novel. Watching these artists accept their grants, seeing hope in their faces, I felt overwhelming gratitude, not just for my own success, but for the ripple effect it created. 1 year after that transformative Sunday dinner, my photography career had exceeded my wildest expectations. I'd published a coffee table book featuring the Forgotten Dreams series. Gallery representation had expanded to 5 cities. Corporate clients included major brands. I'd been featured in 3 national magazines and invited to judge international photography competitions. But the most meaningful development was teaching. I developed a workshop series called Second Chapter Artists specifically for people over 40 pursuing creative careers. The classes filled immediately, often with waiting lists. During one workshop, a woman raised her hand. "How did you handle the self-doubt? The voice saying you were too old, too inexperienced?" I smiled, recognizing the question I'd asked myself countless times. I documented everything, every small success, every positive review, every sale. When doubt crept in, I reviewed that evidence, objective proof that I was making progress. Another student, a man around 50, added, "What about family members who don't support your dreams?" I paused, thinking about my father. Sometimes the people closest to us project their own fears and regrets onto our ambitions. My father spent 30 years telling me my photography was a waste of time, I continued. What I didn't realize initially was that he wasn't actually talking about me. He was talking about himself, about his abandoned writing dreams. I showed the class the before and after. Photos of my father at that dismissive Sunday dinner, compared to recent pictures of him at foundation events, genuinely smiling. People can change when confronted with evidence that contradicts their worldview. My success forced my father to reconsider his assumptions about age, timing, and creative pursuits. The class was silent, absorbing this. Finally, someone asked, "But what if they never change? What if your family never supports you?" "Then you proceed anyway," I said firmly. "Your dreams can't be held hostage to others' approval. I built my entire career while my father actively discouraged it. His eventual support was wonderful, but it wasn't necessary. I was succeeding regardless." This became the core message of my workshops. Pursue your passions strategically, document your progress, and don't wait for permission from people who don't understand your vision. My father attended one of my workshops unexpectedly. He sat in the back, listening as I taught techniques for building a creative business after 40. During the break, students recognized him from the foundation launch. "Your daughter is remarkable," one told him. "She's giving us permission to pursue dreams we thought had expired." My father smiled. "She's teaching me the same lesson. I've started writing again, seriously this time, working on a memoir." After class, we walked to a nearby cafe. "I never apologized properly," he said as we settled into a corner booth. "For all those years of dismissing your talent, your dedication, your dreams. You've apologized through action," I replied. "The foundation, your support now, your own creative pursuit, those matter more than words." He stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that Sunday dinner. When you handed me that folder of my rejection letters, I was angry initially, felt like you'd invaded my privacy." "I know. But I needed you to understand where your criticism was really coming from. You were right. I was bitter about my own failures." "Not failures," I corrected gently. "Abandoned attempts, there's a difference. You didn't fail at writing, you stopped trying." My father nodded slowly. "My memoir is almost finished. I've been working with a writing coach, taking it seriously, not to get published necessarily, but to complete something I started 40 years ago." "How does it feel?" I asked. "Terrifying, liberating, like reconnecting with a part of myself I'd buried." He looked at me directly. "You gave me that gift. By refusing to accept my limitations as your own, you showed me they weren't real limitations at all, just fears I'd internalized." We talked about his memoir, my upcoming exhibitions, the foundation's growing impact. 2 years earlier, these conversations would have been impossible. My father would have dismissed creative pursuits entirely. Now, he embraced them with the same strategic intensity he'd once applied to investments. As we prepared to leave, he handed me a printed manuscript. "The first draft, I'd like you to read it when you have time." I took it carefully, honored by the trust. I will, and Dad, thank you. 2 years after that Sunday dinner, I stood in my studio preparing for my largest exhibition yet. The second chapter's series featured portraits of artists over 40 who'd pursued creative careers after years in other fields. My father was among them. His portrait showed him at his writing desk, surrounded by notebooks and typed pages, his expression peaceful and focused. The exhibition opening was packed. Media covered it extensively, drawn by the compelling stories behind each portrait. But for me, the most meaningful moment came when my father stood before his own portrait. I never imagined being on this side, he admitted quietly, being the subject instead of the skeptic. Life has plot twists, I smiled. 2 years ago, you told me I was wasting my time. Now you're part of an exhibition celebrating creative courage. He turned to me, eyes bright. You proved me spectacularly wrong, and I've never been happier about being wrong. Looking around the gallery at the faces of artists who'd refused to let their dreams die, I felt profound satisfaction. Not just in my own success, but in the transformation it sparked. My father's foundation had helped over 50 artists. My workshops had inspired hundreds more. The ripple effect of refusing to accept limitations continued expanding. My father had said I'd never make it. Instead, I'd proven that making it wasn't about his approval or anyone else's. It was about honoring my authentic self, building strategically toward my goals, and refusing to let fear, mine or others, dictate my choices. That Sunday dinner had been his attempt to diminish my dreams. Instead, it became the catalyst for both our transformations. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply becoming undeniably, authentically successful on your own terms. Kindly subscribe to our channel for more stories. Revenge with Dorothea.